Hello, everyone. I'm Miriam Bale, and I am the Artistic Director of Indie Memphis. And welcome to IndieTalks. This is our third day of IndieTalks, part of the Indie Memphis Film Festival, which is sponsored by Duncan Williams, Inc. And IndieTalks is graciously sponsored by the Hohenberg Foundation, and we are very grateful for the support. Um, we also have support from Forever Ready Productions, so thank you to them for making our virtual Indie Talks work. And our topic today is on production during COVID, something that I think we're all fascinated by, wondering what the new parameters are, and we are very lucky to have two wonderful guests who I will introduce now. First is Bart Shannon. Bart is here in Memphis, and Bart is the creative director at Via Productions, a video production company with offices in Memphis and Portland, Oregon. He is also director of Via's first feature-length film entitled Unrecognizably Famous, a documentary focusing on obscure yet beloved comedian Gary Mule Deer, which is currently in post-production, and I can't wait to see. Which has some indie Memphis roots in it too, which I can't wait to see. Thank you for being here, Bart.
Thanks, Mary. I'm glad to be here.
Great. And then next we have Sibel Martin, and Sibel is in LA. Singled out for her expressive and stylized work, Sibel Martin is the first African American woman to receive an MFA in cinematography from New York University. Wow. That's just wow. She served as the magic eye behind Dee Ree's Orange Bow, which premiered at Tribeca Film Festival, and for Sangam, recognized as its deeply moody textured palette, which premiered at Sundance. Recently, Martin shot a vampire film for Blumhouse, part of a new anthology series which will premiere on Amazon Prime. Her other credits include work on ABC's The Rookie, CBS's All Rise, Shonda Rhimes' For the People, Netflix series She Gotta Have It, based on the Spike Lee film. She was recognized by American Cinematography magazine as one of the rising stars of cinematography in March 2020. Originally from New York, Sibel lives in Los Angeles and is an avid traveler, also a painter, very accomplished painter and photographer, which I admire. Welcome, Sibel. Thank you for
Thank
being here.
you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute delight. So let's talk about this. So, March, we all went into lockdown, and I'm sure both of you production stopped for a while. And then it started back up. Sibel, can you talk a little bit about that period in March and about how I'm sure there was a worry about what would happen, and then how did production start sort of ramping back? Was it slow? Was it all of a sudden? I know there were some very specific guidelines produced. And can you talk a little bit about that timeline?
Yeah, I mean, there's really so much to talk about. I mean, it's sort of, being in New York, where everyone knows where they were when the towers were hit. It's like everyone knows where they were when the plug was pulled. Oh, it's so strange. Where I don't see you again. Can they switch it so I can still talk to you and I can still
Yes.
see you? Okay, I don't want to just talk to myself. It's so disoriented. Like, I'm so tired of just talking to myself. Thank you. But so I remember that week in March, and we are doing this movie. Our hours are, it's hours are film hours. So I'm shooting this narrative. We're in New Orleans. We're all over the place. We're just like go 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 go, and every so often someone would check the news or would get a text message, and you didn't have to talk to them to know that there was a new development. It was like every minute there was a new development, and I'm a very positive, optimistic person, and we're just like, no, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna. And then I remember the New York Times sent everyone home, and then someone announced that on set. Like one of my crew members is like, yeah, the New York Times, everyone's working from home. And I'm like, that's not good. And we were just waiting and waiting and waiting, and then finally, our production sent us home. Pretty much everyone got sent home by March 13th that weekend, and no one, like, still people didn't know really. I mean, at least filmmakers, other people knew, health professionals knew, but filmmakers, we still were like, okay, this is really bad. But a lot of us were like, oh, we have this 2 week timeline. And so I'm like, this is great. Let me just go home, bunker down for 2 weeks, give me 2 extra weeks to reconfigure stuff, like extra prep, and try to spin it positive. And then as things kept stretching out and you kept learning more, I was like, I'm good just shutting down for the rest of the year. I was like, if I don't work again for this whole thing to get figured out, and then I go back in 2021, I'm like, I'm good if that's the option. And I'm really appreciative that our producers were always in communication with us. It was because I'd heard some shows shut down, and those producers were like, okay, thanks. Some friends of mine who were shooting pilots, they never got to finish. It was and I was like, I don't know if that's going to happen to us. I'm still so forever grateful that our producers stayed in connection with myself and the other crew members and my director, and kept giving us new plans to go back to work. And so I so appreciative, because you just don't know. Like pre-COVID, if a job shuts down, you're like, okay, are we ever going to get back to work? And so at one point we were going to go back, say, I don't know, it was April. I mean, it kept changing, but they were like, we will go back to work when we feel we can do it safely according to all the new protocols coming out. So then when I finally went back in July, they were going with, pretty strict protocols. The TV show I'm on now, the protocols are pretty much the same as this film that I was shooting in New Orleans. And I felt taken care of. I felt that everyone was doing what they believed was the best, given what information we had. And so it was still very daunting and very scary. And it, you're like, is this reckless? Is this whatever? And I chose to jump in anyway. So yeah, and it was, knock on wood, thankfully there were no incidences. But a part of me was like, well, I've traveled so much for work. I've gone to places where people are like, don't go. And you just sort of use your gut, you make the best choices you can make. And I was like, when I go back to work, it's even like that in Los Angeles. You go to work, you do everything you think you can do, then some. And then, if you choose to go to work, you just have to go to work. You can't go to work and be scared. I mean, I guess. But anyway, that's how I treated it. It's like traveling. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it is. There's so much more. That's just I'll dig in a little deeper. But let me ask you, Bart, how was that timeline for you? Were you working around that same time in March, and how did things change, and when did they start up again?
Well, we do more commercial production and corporate work, and it knocked everybody on their heels because all of a sudden customers weren't in stores, and no one knew how to target people that couldn't come into the store. So there was a full month where everyone tried to figure out the best approach moving forward. And on our end, for the corporate aspect, we started focusing on live streams, so that filled the need that way. So for any events they couldn't do in person, we were able to step in and handle live feeds. And for commercial work, animation became an immediate friend because you didn't have to do a shoot. Clients that weren't a big fan of animation before quickly became a fan of animation because it was a way to get content out there and reach the customers. And then we have a technology in-house that helps shift to online buying. So it kind of helps in that regard. But like Sibel said, it was hard when the clients started getting ready to shoot again, and there weren't protocols in place yet, and it was like, are we doing the right thing by doing this? Because they were like, all right, clock's ticking. We've run the animated in these uncertain times commercial enough. We can't do it anymore. We need new content. So we had to kind of play it by ear. And I think, Sibel, like we were talking about earlier, I think you guys had, in the work you do, a little more stringent rules. And here it was sort of just kind of figuring out a plan as we go. And it's still evolving. I'm working on a project right now, and we do every other day PCR testing instead of the daily rapid testing, and so it gives you that peace of mind. But you look back at that Rose Garden event and at the White House where they were also cocksure that they weren't going to get it because they get tested every day, and lo and behold, you get a super spreader. So there's still that aspect where every day, we wear masks on set. Talent wears a mask offset, but as soon as they're ready to roll, the mask comes off. And there's still an aspect every day to me is, are we still doing enough? Is this still the right thing? So I guess it's still a learning process.
For commercials, I noticed right after lockdown began, there was also, you mentioned animation, but I also noticed a lot of use of stock footage.
Oh yeah, we did that too. I just didn't want to say that. That seems so easy. It's an easy go-to, but oh yeah, we did a lot of stock footage. Yeah. So for those who were either already sick of animation or it didn't fit, yeah, stock footage became their best friend.
Yeah, that was. And then you mentioned that there are different protocols, and so I'm wondering, Sibel, who was setting those protocols? Was it the guilds? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, all of the guilds have their papers, and then, God, I mean, I feel like you should bring in a producer just to get this all right. I would be like friends would send everyone all the different papers, like these are the new protocols, and so I have all of these PDFs, and at the beginning I would read all of them. It's like get ready for work, get ready for work, get ready for work. But I wasn't going back to work, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to stop reading this because it's making me anxious. Because they're big PDFs with lots of pages with lots of stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's better just to bring in a producer to go through all of that decision making. But it did come down to the guilds, obviously, in the studios. Right now I'm shooting at Warner Brothers, and so that system had to agree upon all the protocols. Our unions had to agree on all the protocols, and every union obviously has certain needs that need to be addressed and met and taken care of. And so there was a constant, I don't know, back and forth. And I believe they didn't all agree until like beginning of September or something. So when I went back to New Orleans, that was, and I'm not sure honestly, but when I went back to New Orleans, we had very strict protocols. I don't remember whose we were following, but what we were doing in New Orleans pretty much mimics what I'm doing now at Warner Brothers.
Okay, interesting. And Bart, did you find that did you change the did you have smaller productions? Did you have fewer people on sets, or is that stayed the same?
No, absolutely. That became part of our process as well. We pared down our crews pretty quickly, and there a few of our clients they focus on children, and so we didn't want to take that chance of exposing any of these kids to it. So we pared down the crew, and it had its challenges, not only with putting extra work on our plates on a day-to-day basis, but also and things you were able to achieve, because we had some clients that said, look, we need to shoot and we can't have more than 3 people on the crew. So there were a lot of 3-people crews during those first few months, because that's all we could do. And it started loosening up now, especially with testing. And Sibel, do you guys typically do rapid testing day to day?
No, we do every other day.
Okay.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Yeah. The nose and throat and all that. Yeah. Good times.
Thankfully, the swab doesn't have to go back as far as it used to. I took a test early on during the pandemic, and they touched my spine with the swab, and now they just have to go back to the back of the nose. So it's a little more tolerable.
Bart, did you say when you went back? When did you start up again?
I honestly, I can't tell you the actual. It was a gradual thing, but not until I would say August, before clients were saying we need content. Let's just shoot. So there were smaller shoots, like I said, with the small crews, but I don't think it was until August before some people were like, let's do this the right way and follow protocols, and the crew started getting a little bigger, and thankfully, no one that I know on any of those crews to date, has had an issue with it.
Bart, did in LA they had the peak in LA was later after New York, but I think it's gone down again. So, but I noticed that in Tennessee and especially Mississippi, the rates are going up where you're shooting a lot. Are you preparing for a second wave as they?
Unfortunately, yeah. Like Sibel said, she's a very positive person. I wish I could say the same about myself. And not to get political, but the frustrations of where we live and how it's viewed, and even by our own governor. So I don't have a lot of confidence in the numbers doing anything but spike. So I could easily see us basically incrementally going back in the opposite direction, small crews, then God forbid animation and stock footage again. But that's what the numbers look like they're staying.
Oh no! And Sibel, going back to Bart's my question to Bart, I'm sure part of the protocol for you too is having smaller crews. Has that been a challenge?
Well, in New Orleans, so New Orleans, when we went back in July. Mm-hmm. So they went, this is my guess, is that we went by the protocols that had been published at the time and then some. That's what it seemed like. And so we kept our crew below 50, and it had to be 50 at any time, which meant we could still have a rigging crew. We could still have other crew, but in terms of on set, it was a total of 50 people, I believe, crew and cast. And it took a little adjusting, but in some ways, it's, okay, this is where I'm like, I have to be careful with how I word things. In some ways, this time has forced us to be more disciplined, and that has actually made production better. So I obviously wish the pandemic had never happened. However, with these limits in terms of crew size and all the other protocols that we have in place, means much more time put into pre-production. And I actually believe my cinematography was stronger when we went back in, because it wasn't, oh, we can do this and we have this alternate, or we'll shoot. I mean, I had 2 camera operators when we were shooting in February. I went back with only 1 camera operator, and it was like, okay, how do we, and we still had the same amount of time, or maybe even less. It's like, how do we still tell the same story? And so we all dug into that. We all dug into that limitation. And, I like to say, use a limitation as your aesthetic. Like, we just said, this is what we're dealing with. We're shooting in New Orleans. So already we have something in our favor. We're shooting in New Orleans. We're down in crew. Let's make it work. And I do think my work is stronger. So, on the show now, I don't think I have less crew, but we just have face shields and masks and plastic things and partitions between us. And so I don't know, what was your original question exactly? It's just like
my original question is, if I assumed you had smaller crew, but it doesn't sound like significant, and if that was a challenge, but it sounds like in some ways your optimism has
sorry.
No, I love it. Turn the question into like the fact that you've been more disciplined. That's absolutely fascinating.
Oh, actually, I know what the other bit was, is that, so the other nice thing is that if one is fortunate enough to work with producers who see the challenges that we face with having less crew, they've put more money into gear. So that's meant more like jib arbs and Ronins. And so things that we can do and have more distance from the actors. And so again, that job and the job I'm on now, I'm very fortunate that the producers weren't like, less crew and everything else the same. They're like, less crew, but we will then put money into technology to help you still be creative. And that happened. Like, you don't know who you're working with until, stuff really happens. And they were very supportive of being like, okay, you want a crane for this, you want this, you want a jib, you want, so we could still have, like, we were really nervous going back in July that what we shot, people would be able to look at it and go, there's the COVID footage. Like, we didn't want to lose our aesthetic. suddenly it's all handheld and doc style, like before it was hard, long shadows, like suddenly it's like documentary. So it's putting a lot of time into prep. My director did lots of storyboards. She did pre-COVID, but we were just really, 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 really clear on what we wanted before we showed up on set. So there was hopefully no misunderstanding, and everyone could just get to work and get what we needed and get out quickly and safely.
So I know what a crane is, but for lay people, can you describe what a jibbar is and a Ronin? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they're different. I mean, Ronins well, a crane, obviously, you can go different heights, and a jib is kind of like a poor man's crane. It can attach onto your dolly and allow you to get closer to the actors without you being over there. And you can use wheels on it to operate it. And then a Ronin, you can attach onto a jib, or you can use it like when Ronins first came out, like people use it as kind of like a poor man's Steadicam, but now they're much more developed. And so you can do a lot of moving. You can move the camera and then hand it onto someone. You do some really fun moves. And so I don't know if I'm explaining it so well, but it's just like fun camera operating toys that we get to play with. And when we went in November, we had one crane day and a Steadicam operator. And then when we went back in July, we got to have more things to play with. And that was really fun.
That's great. Natural distancing tools. I wanted to also,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I want to just take a moment to let viewers know, if you have questions and you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or Eventive, you can just put the question in the comments and they will get to us, and I will make sure to get them to our guests. So we'll get to the Q&A portion a little bit later. But Isabel, I want to ask, one of the things that inspired this panel is I saw something you posted about being back on set during COVID and using ASL on set. Can you tell me a little bit about that? That is fascinating.
Sure. This is like my favorite little story, and I try to tell people to get them inspired. But so going back to my thinking of returning to work, of like going to countries, like traveled a lot into countries that might not be, I don't know, as easy to navigate through, let's say. And so I was like, how am I going to go back to work and make sure I have all of my needs, I don't feel frustrated? And I was like, that's what it's about, is that we're going to get back in, we're going to have all this stuff on us, and people are still going to want us to be creative under a certain amount of time. Like, how can I still, like, how do I mitigate my frustration is what it comes down to. It's like when you travel, like I always bring food when I travel, so I don't have to worry about, if a restaurant's open, because you grew up in New York, you're used to always being a restaurant open. You start traveling, suddenly everything closes at 8. So when you travel for work, you always have food with you. That kind of mindset. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be on a film set. I'm going to have a mask. I'm going to have a shield. I hate walkies. Everyone who's worked with me knows I hate walkies. How am I going to communicate? And like, in filmmaking, we all have hand signals. Like if you grow up as like a grip or electric, there's certain for camera too, there's basic hand signals. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if we had hand signals, so I didn't have to try to get my walkie out, or if the director's not, and and we were just like, why don't we just use, like, someone's already designed a language for hand signals. We don't have to make them up. Because first we were like, oh, we can make up, like, one finger means it. And we're like, no. Like, there's actually, like, a very, very old, standard, like, system to communicate with signs. So we learned, like, maybe 10 to 20. The first AD, she has a young son. And so, like a lot of my friends, she's been teaching her son sign language anyway. And we just learned enough that I didn't have to get frustrated, because that's what it comes down to, like, that you can be on set, communicate what you need, and move on, So we'd be like, okay, the first AD or someone would look over at me and I'd say, like, we're moving on. They're like, oh, okay. Like, oh, I need another. Like, okay. And it wasn't like, oh, where's my walk-in and what channel are you on again? And all that frustration trying to get the attention of the PA who's sitting by Village, because the PA has to be by Village, but not by Village. It still has to be 6 feet apart. So to get his attention, to come near me, but not too close. And instead, I could just go, I need another one. And it was like, great. It was great. I wish as I learn them and I try to teach them to people, I'm always like, okay, I don't know. This is not really this is not my language at all. I watched a video online. So, people who actually do speak sign language, I wish someone would hear this and teach it to all of us and just make it common. Because I noticed on my new job, I would look at the KPA by my DIT, and they always check to make sure I'm good to move on. And I would go like this, and I'm like, why does he understand? I'm like, why doesn't he know I'm trying to go move on? And I was like, okay, I really would love to make this like universal, like just basic signs. Because having all this stuff, like I'm required to wear a face shield and a face mask on set, whether I'm indoors or outdoors. And it's hard to hear people through all that. And like voices get like, they mumble. I mean, I mumble anyway, but like through all that stuff, it's really hard to hear people. Like some people's pitch of voice is easier to hear than others. And they'll have a walkie on, and it's just a lot. And if you can just be able to communicate like basic things, like I need another, let's go again, ready for first team, ready for second team, where's the director? I use that one a lot in New Orleans. I'm like, where's our director? Because she'd be off talking to talent or something. And I'm like, I need to talk to her. And so it's, yeah, it was fun, because filmmaking is a fun career. It's a really joyful career. And we would try to do signs or, make up things or try to do signs sarcastically. And it was funny, you know what I mean? Like it brought some life in a very, very, very stressful environment. I mean, for people who haven't gone back to work, I cannot express enough how stressful this is. It's so stressful to go back to work. It is so stressful. So back to the sign language, it was something to be fun. It was something to learn. It was something to share and giggle about. And it helped mitigate my frustration, which was the main point, is that I needed to be calm.
Such a good idea. And for everyone. And it's such a wonderful thing to continue. We probably don't realize how much unconscious lip reading we do normally, too. But now without having that, it makes sense to lean on a language that's made especially for that,
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you, Bart? Let's pass on some of Sibel's optimism. Have you found any? Have you found any?
Well, I did just Google rudimentary sign language while she was talking, just to see, because from decades of live music, my hearing is shot, and I had no idea how bad until you put a mask on someone's face, so you can't read their lips anymore. And then recently, my AD, who I knew his hearing was shot, and so we're both trying to communicate, and we can't read each other's lips like we normally can, so we don't know what each other's saying. So yeah, that's a fantastic idea. I haven't even thought about that. And I'm a space invader too. So like when I want to come up and talk to you, I'll come up a little too close because I need to hear. And it's probably also because I can't hear what people are saying most of the time. But no, that's pretty awesome. And I will seriously look into some of those signs.
And I was going to ask, so that would be a great advantage of this, something that we could bring into production. But have you had any, like Sibel mentioned that this was leading to more disciplined productions. Have you seen anything like that in your experience has there been any advantage of new ways of working, maybe pared down is better in some ways? What do you think?
Well, I mean, in commercial production, the one thing that really came to a head early was with these really small crews, the ideas could not be as grand as they used to be. So you had to pare down the idea, but the idea still has to be a good idea. You can't say, sorry guys, we have a small crew, so this is the only idea I have. So it really did force a reevaluation of coming up with these ideas. It was almost, like the indie aspect of it kicked into gear immediately. Like, oh, this is what it's always been. I got, back in the days, I got $1,000 and I want to make a film. What can I make work within $1,000? It was the same thing. Trying to come up with concepts that you could do with 3 to 5 people instead of, it's like we don't have a 5-person G&E crew on this. It's not going to happen. What can we make happen? A lot of daylight stuff was one thing that definitely happened. But yeah, I would say discipline of ideas, because when you have the tools available, you'll come up with the ideas based on the tools you have or the access to tools. But when those aren't available based on manpower, then the ideas get a little more, I don't want to say more simple, but more refined, more concise. And there's an aspect of that I still like the fact that, okay, let's see what kind of idea we can come up with that won't require a gigantic crew, even though people are starting to get more comfortable with a big crew again. So yeah, discipline.
Yeah, simpler, stronger ideas rather than high concept or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. And Sibel, I talked to Bart a little bit about, anticipations. What about you? Are you feel like that production might shut down again, or do you think these new protocols will just keep carrying on production fairly steadily?
My understanding is, and again, if there's a producer out there who can, set this right, my understanding is that it's whether we shut down or not is not contingent on our protocols. It's contingent on the city. So if LA gets certain levels, it doesn't matter how safe I am. Because I feel like there was a point like late summer where they were like, okay, we may not be able to go into production anyway if the numbers get worse in Los Angeles. So I'm pretty certain that's the case, that it doesn't matter how safe we are. And I mean, I feel good on my set. I have friends who are on other TV shows and I hear their protocols and I'm like, I don't, okay, I'm not a scientist, but that just sounds like a little lax right now. And there have been shows that have shut down for various reasons. But yeah, I don't know. I'd like to still stay positive, but we have a lot of different things going on this year that need to be handled. And this is going to be an interesting year. I really don't know. I don't want us to shut down again. I'm very fortunate. I work in an industry that went back to work. There's a bunch of industries. I mean, you talk about live music. My friends who are musicians, friends who are Broadway actors, that's their form of self-expression. And I really hope we can stay working and then they can go back to some level of working to just feel that energy again. But it's not on us. It's really, I believe it's really on the cities and the government.
Yeah, and hard to know what's to expect. Absolutely. So you mentioned if you were offered a job that was like a dream job, but the safety protocols seem lax, you would definitely turn it down.
Oh, absolutely. I have.
You have.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not worth it. It never is. No, I mean, no, it never is. If you feel during an interview that it's a production that won't protect you, it will only get worse once you take the job.
Really sound advice.
So, I mean, I'm not, I mean, anything that would be a dream job, part of it being a dream job would be that they had protocols in place to protect me. That would be part of the dream job. I can't imagine any director that I would love to work with wanting to be that much of a risk taker. I can't imagine it.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. So no, it's a very good answer. So I'm going to get the questions. Again, if you have questions and you're on Facebook or YouTube or Eventive, please put it in the comments. And here's a question from Facebook. Did a new position of protocol specialist get created in either of your fields?
You want to go first?
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have several COVID, I think they call them HSS, health specialists something. I don't know. There's like an HSS, there's an HS something. Yeah, we have a lot of COVID people on our set, off the set, people we can email. And if we have questions, we have 2 people testing us. We have a lot of people.
And on a smaller scale, we typically have a person, so if it's a crew of 5 or 6 people, that we have a single person whose job it is to make sure that we're all that no one's not getting lax about the protocols and that everything is being followed, because there's so many aspects of it that you don't even think about. Like, I mean, one of the craft service, just reaching in and grabbing a handful of food out of a bag. I mean, that just doesn't happen anymore. And those are the type of things on set that are just part of it every day that have to be adjusted. Touching anything, especially when it comes to food, and anything shared. But yeah, we typically on a smaller scale have a person who it makes sure that everyone's adhering to those and no one's messing up and putting us all in danger.
Wow. So where do those people come from? Are they just coming from the producers, or are they coming from the health department? Like where did this new position, where do they evolve from? Does anyone know?
I've heard varying stories. I can't speak about the people, because I don't ask their credentials. I'm told this is the person we're speaking to, and I trust. Some will have their email will be from a health organization, but I've also heard of other companies getting COVID officers or whatever, and they were just people who come out of HR, or they come out of where they help you follow the protocols, but they don't have a background in medicine. I believe the person that was our point person in New Orleans worked at a hospital in New York, or he had some affiliation with the hospital in New York, and dealt with COVID there and then came. But I'm not sure. I just, a certain level of trust, like you kind of just have to go, okay, this is the person they hired. I'm going to hope and assume that they went through and it wasn't just someone's uncle, who was bored, but it's actually someone who knows what they're talking about, and I mean, on the current job, there's so many people that we have involved as COVID officers, and yeah, I have no idea where they all came from. I just have to trust that, the producers care enough to hire people who really know.
Yeah. Yeah. So. And so here's another question from Eventive, Alex Kurtzman. He's asking about the increased cost of COVID production. And he said that the producer of the new Trek shows estimated $300 to $500K per episode COVID costs. How does that sound? Or I think he's saying, does that sound correct? I don't know if that $300 to $500K is in addition just COVID costs. Can you, Alex, if you can clarify in a comment, that would be helpful. But I'm assuming, so have you, I know that, Bill, you're not doing budget as much, but maybe Bart, you are.
At all.
Okay, at all. Is it like, do you have a sense of increased cost for COVID production costs, Bart?
Again, on a smaller scale, like one thing, back to Crafty, it was something that we realized that we had to have just individual coolers for every single person. So that is something that we did. We had to invest in coolers for every person on crew, so no one could stick their hand in a shared cooler anymore, or at least if there was a shared cooler, there was hand sanitizer before you did it and things like that. So yeah, I mean that 300 to 500K seems a little high, but I mean on a 5-person crew on a 2-day shoot, yeah, it goes up. Even on a small shoot like that, it goes up about $2,000. So
$2,000. You said
yeah.
$2,000. Wow. So that makes sense. Maybe on a bigger scale, that might be true for just COVID costs.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, testing can't be cheap. Just testing alone can't be cheap if you have a large crew. You have a few hundred people who have to be tested every 2 days.
Right. I think pooled testing, at least in Memphis, is $60 a head every day. So yeah, you want to $60 times how many people are on the crew every 2 days, and you put everything else aside, and that's a substantial cost on a 6-week shoot.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, speculatively, I don't expect either of you to have this answer, but just as a viewer and programmer, I'm wondering what this will do, how this will change the type of productions, these increased costs. I mean, we've seen like blockbusters just be delayed completely this year. And, a part of me, and this has more to do with exhibition and just, smaller, like less packed houses. And, I hope that it'll be more of a return to smaller productions. But I've heard the opposite, that people suggest that the increased cost will mean that we'll have the end of these smaller middle productions, or not the end, but a real hold on those, and really just only really huge productions. I don't know if either of you have any speculation on this.
You mean for distribution? Like
No, for production. I mean for production, like what's going to be, like what kind of films will be made next? Like how will increased COVID costs change the type of films that are made?
I mean, I've heard there's a lot of movies being made, one location, 2-3 people, that kind of, there's a mystery, there's someone in the woods, or there's an argument over, the dinner table. More contained things if they can't afford the money of a, big tent, Marvel. Like if you don't have Marvel money, you have to kind of go the indie route. That's the chatter I've seen on Twitter. So I, again, not a producer. But I imagine a lot of people are writing stories that are just, that they know can be COVID compliant. Like before I went back in July, I would watch a movie, and there are some movies that already exist where I'm like, that could be COVID compliant already, because it's like the way things are shot, like they're already 6 feet apart. There's not a lot of people. There's no big crowd scenes. It's like that could be COVID compliant if everyone's masked with shields and whatever, and the actors are at distance. But then I don't know, because if it's thought expensive to test people and all the other things, like you're talking about crafty, all the other stuff that I don't think about, like cleaning the bathrooms and re-cleaning the props, and it's a lot of cleaning products, and putting people up in hotels, and it's a lot. I don't know. That's the only thing I can guess is just smaller number in the cast.
Any thoughts on it, Bert?
I think, Mike, what I'm curious about is what comes next. So after COVID, and Sabella, I'm going to be positive and say there is an after COVID. Okay. But my curiosity is like, what happens after COVID? It's like, for this year, we're, like you guys were saying, there are film festivals even with its quarantine themed films, and a lot of quarantine type content has come out, and I'm curious if once we get on the other side of this, what the content will look like as a reaction to it. Not necessarily, as a reaction to the budgets or the constraints, but do we rebel as humans to the type of life we've lived for a year? Almost like you could look back at like 9/11 and see the type of content that came out right after that, and it was more heartfelt for a while, and then it was like, all right, we're tired of being heartfelt. We need levity. We need levity now, and so we'll have that kind of reaction too. I just don't know what that is, but we are resilient animals, and I'm curious to see what that will be.
Well, there's a related question from Eventive. Josh says, due to COVID, so much of production has become Zoom calls. Have you seen anything interesting with the format of people talking to their computers?
Well, I know my last job, I was no longer there, but All Rise did a really excellent episode just using Zoom. And there's a horror movie out that uses Zoom, and I haven't watched it, but I've heard people said it's really entertaining. It took me a long time to be on Zoom calls and not be jittery. Like it just during when I was under hardcore quarantine, I did not enjoy, like this right now would not have happened for me in June. I would have said flat out no. This made me so uncomfortable. That for me is not entertaining, I don't think, but who knows? With those two instances, people really enjoyed it.
Any thoughts on that, Bart?
Yeah, I think, and I can't think of that film either, Sabella. I know the one you're talking about. Right. Joey Carr or Macon were on here. They could tell us the name of that immediately. But I think we'll see almost like with like the Blair Witch Project, those type of projects that'll happen. I think there will be Zoom related projects that will connect with us because we've all done this for so long already. And when was the pandemic? When did that start? 1986. That's what it feels like. So we're all used to this format. But yeah, I don't know. Again, it's like I don't know what we do after this. It may be one of those things where none of us Zoom just may crash because none of us ever want to see this again.
I mean, like, I want to burn my yoga pants. You know what I mean? Like, at first it was a great idea. Now I never want to see them again. So, but back to your other question, like, back to me being positive and optimistic, a dream I have for the film community and for Hollywood is that we had so much time to sit and think, and the pandemic coinciding, or I don't know what would be the correct word, but with the whole Black Lives Matter movement happening and continuing to happen, and so much going on that is bigger and deeper than just like, oh, I want to entertain people. And we've just had to sit with our thoughts. And people have started making changes in who they hire and what stories they want to tell and what stories they want to give money to. And I hope that my hope is for this world and for our industry is that we get healthier, we get over this, and then that space remains, because there currently is a space open to hear different storytellers and not get on them about not having the credentials, being like, oh, I want to hear your story. I don't care if you went to film school. I don't care if you were in a writer's room. I want to hear your story. So I hope that space remains open when we get past the pandemic, and those stories can still be told, and they're still getting money, and they're still being heard. Because there's a lot of people right now who I don't want to be corny and be like their eyes have opened, but they've been like, oh, I actually have a lot of power, and I can make a lot of people's lives easier and more creative with not much effort on my part. And I see that in a lot of people's lives where they're getting these opportunities that in 2019 seemed impossible. And suddenly people are like, oh, yeah, okay, but you have an interesting idea. I'll support it. So I really hope that stays, and that whatever comes next, that there are still stories being told that are not, I mean, I like all the usual stories, but, I'm up for different stories, a different way of telling the same story or whatever. And so that's my hope.
No, you're so right. I mean, during COVID, the political uprisings and awareness is not unrelated to COVID. I mean, it's hard to know exactly in what ways. I saw a panel with Jane Fonda, and she said COVID has been a boon to the left. And I was like, what are you talking about, Jane Fonda?
Right.
But in some ways, there is some connection to like more political awareness, and that's fair enough to know about how material will change. Another thing that I really wonder, just in this call, I've noticed more weddings in October than like ever. Like so many people. I think there's something about the crisis and the pandemic, and people are just pairing up in ways and really just being like, life is short. And I've noticed in Hollywood, people are usually traveling so much that they've had more time for relationships, which is really weird and different. And I wonder how much that will influence material. Do you know what I mean, Samantha?
I do, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not used to being home. Like, if I'm not shooting, I'm on a plane somewhere. It's wild and weird to be here, to stay here. And I'm not alone. It's, filmmakers are always on a plane.
Yeah, it's really, and I think the combination of like apocalyptic fears and just, spending more time at home. People are, it's a permanent cuffing season, and hopefully there'll be more influence. There'll be some kind of influence on the content. I want to ask Sybil, this is a really random question, but when you were talking more about tools, well, I'm just wondering, and I'm going to show my ignorance, but like, do you think you'll turn to like long lenses more? Because I remember the
yeah, we already have.
Oh, you have?
I mean, and this is where it's nice having a COVID officer, because I ask a lot of questions. Pre-COVID, I always ask too many questions. I'm always asking a lot of questions. I need to understand these things. And so when we first started, everyone's like, hey, you have to be on long lenses, you have to da-da-da. But now what it is that we don't have to be on long lenses if we have all of our stuff and all the other protocols are being met. So at the beginning, though, it was like, yes, long lenses, we're far away, we're on the 12-1, or, whatever, we're across the street. But I still try to keep prime lenses, wide lenses to a minimum, because you always want to find that balance between, like, you're choosing your battles. Like, you want to be an artist, but you also want to protect everyone. Like, my whole thing is like protect people, their sanity, because it is a very anxious environment, and I want my crew to feel like, oh, okay, if the shot is just da-da-da, then we can get in, we get out, and we can relax. And so that's important. So if it's really, really important to have a wide lens up close, a foot away from the actor, fine, we'll do it. But usually, to tell the same story, you're okay being on a longer lens. It really is not that deep. You choose those battles. And long lenses are pretty anyway. You can change what your depth of field is to still, give it some depth, if you need that. And so we have the tools to still tell a lot of stories. We're not stuck with a long lens. And again, the protocols have it that we do not have to be across the street. You know what I mean?
That's good, but I'm sure you would come up with something beautiful if you did. I mean,
well, thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for this conversation. It was so informative and interesting. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun. Great meeting you, Bart.
Yeah, it was a
blast. And just want to say thanks again to the Hohenberg Foundation for supporting these Indie Talks. Our next one is tomorrow at 4 p.m. on the importance of intimacy coordinators. So that should be another interesting conversation. And in a little bit, we have another conversation with the director of Born Balearic, Renee, followed by a DJ set. So we're not having a big party this year, but you can all dance in your living rooms or your bedrooms. And please join us at 8 p.m. for a Balearic DJ set. So thank you again to Bart and Sibel, and thank you to Forever Ready and to the Hohenberg Foundation. And see you all later. Bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.